Hello and welcome to Illustrator Essential Training, Shapes. So today I'm going to show you a couple things. First, we'll just start off with going over a basic idea of the layout of Illustrator. So you all know by now that this is our artboard, and then we have the toolbar and we have panels. You can change your workspace by going to Window, Workspace. You can change to Painting, or you can change to any of these other ones. Right now I'm just going to be on Typography. So you can change the workspace, and you can also manually move things around and open up different windows if you have specific ones that you want to sort of dock in your sidebar. So that's one thing that's important to know. The other thing is you have your artboard right here. You can press Command or Control plus or minus to go in or out. Those are keyboard shortcuts. There's to the tool right here, which is also the zoom tool, going in with just pressing on it and pressing Option for the minus. To center your artboard, just press Command or Control 0, and that brings it back into the screen and centers it. You can also use the hand tool right here to move around, and the keyboard shortcut for that is you can be on any tool and you press the space bar, and then you also have the hand tool, which is very handy when you want to get around your screen. Alright, so as I mentioned, this is the artboard. Later on we'll be doing iterations of our design, and what you want to do then is select the artboard, which here is just the artboard tool here, or Shift 0. This selects your artboard. You'll actually just hold Option or Alt key depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC. You notice there's a double arrow, the black and white arrow, and you're able to duplicate the artboard. This also works for shapes, which I will show you later. So then this is what we'll be using when we're making iterations of our design, or you do one version of your design and then you want to do another version of the design, say just in black and white. So I'm just going to do undo that. I'm just going to bring everything back to the center. So now I'm just going to go over the selections. So I have my object right here, and I'm just going to ungroup it, and I'll go over what grouping is in a minute. If I want to select the shapes that I've drawn, I can use my cursor and just click on an object, but that only selects one part of my object, and there might be multiple parts that I want to actually be a part of whatever I'm doing to it, or moving it, or whatever I am doing. So I can select one thing, hold down Shift and select another, and then select another, but that's not very efficient. I can be in the selection tool and then just create sort of a box and select all the things that way. There's also a couple other ways you can do it. One is the magic wand, and that just sort of selects here. You can also deal with selecting sort of like and like objects that way. The other way is you have a lasso tool. If you're familiar with Photoshop at all, these are similar to some of the selection tools in Photoshop, and you draw around what you want to be selecting. So those are the different selection tools. The other thing I want to talk about is grouping. So why might you want to group a bunch of objects together? Well, if you group objects together, it becomes more like one specific object. So you have to select it. So however you choose to select it, and then you can do Object Group or Command Control Group. And this makes your life easier, so when you're manipulating whatever's on your screen, you can easily be moving around different objects. So you're moving it into one group, but they're still separate objects. This is as opposed to if you create multiple shapes, right? And then you actually combine those shapes using the Shape Builder tool, which, let me find that. Right here is the Shape Builder tool. And this one will actually let you combine the shapes together to make one shape. So you'll see that these are selected. When I actually put them together, now they become one tool. They're more than just grouped. They're now one single item, and that means they're no longer editable individually. So the shape tool is useful in certain respects, but sometimes you don't want to have it become one solid block of a shape. You want them to still have their individual sort of elements to them, but you want them to be grouped together. So that's when you would group an image such as this apple. So you're saying, oh, I've made everything into the group, But how do I actually edit it, one little piece of it? Well, that's when we need isolation mode. And then in order to do that, you just double click on your object, and you'll see that you have this little panel that shows up here, and this is sort of our breadcrumbs. So then you just click into whatever object you want to edit and say, I just want to make this just a tiny bit skinnier. I just, edit it here, and I am editing an item within my group. Now, in order to get out of isolation mode, all you have to do is you can either click here on the top to exit, or just double click on the artboard and you'll exit isolation mode. You'll notice any changes that I make, there becomes a little star up here. That means that this version is no longer saved. If you do Command S or Command or Control S, you'll see that that actually disappears. That means it's saved. So whenever you make a change, Illustrator is just letting you know that now your version is not saved anymore. So that's why it's good to sort of periodically save your work. So in case something happens, your computer, freezes, etc., you don't lose all the work that you've done. So now we're really going to start talking about shapes and your artwork. So first thing I'm going to talk about is resizing your artwork. So you've selected your artwork, however you've chosen to select whatever pieces you're manipulating, and you now want to resize it. You'll notice there are 4 control points, corners, to your bounding box. All right, these are the control points. We'll be using these, and you can also use the 4 corner ones as well, to resize your artwork. But if I just sort of resize this way, or I just resize this way, you'll notice that my artwork becomes distorted and no longer proportional. In order to fix that, you can just go to the corner and hold down the Shift key, and now your artwork resizes proportionally. And this is one of the great things about Illustrator being a vector-based program, is that it doesn't matter how big or how small you make it, it will never be pixelated because it's vector-based, which is based on mathematical formulas. So say I've made my artwork a little bit bigger, and now I actually want to rotate my object. So in order to do that, you can also do that when you've selected your object in the selection mode. You can go to the control point, and you'll notice that if I bring my mouse slightly out of my bounding box, it now is sort of a curved arrow, and that's how I can rotate my object. If I hold down Shift, it lets me rotate incrementally, 45, 90, 130, 180. So it lets me rotate in sort of more defined increments. So I'm just going to undo that. So that's how you rotate your artwork. Now let's talk about distorting and transforming your artwork. So select your artwork, and you can hold down Option or Alt. So Option would be for a Mac and Alt for a PC. And the same thing we did with the artboard, we drag, and you'll notice there becomes double arrows, and now you've duplicated your artwork. And that's just a nice quick way of duplicating your artwork. So I'm going to show you how to actually sort of distort or stylize your object. So if we go to our menu here, you see you have lots of different options, and you want to go to the width tool and hold down, and you'll see now you have many options here. You have a panel, and if you click right here, you hover over the little arrow, you now have popped out this panel of your distorting and transforming tools. So you have lots of tools here. You have warp, you have twirl, pucker, bloat, scallop, crystallize, and wrinkle. And really, it's up to you to play around with how these work. I'm going to go over a couple of them right now. So you select, whatever you want to manipulate, and it manipulates based on these anchor points. So the warp tool allows you to warp objects based on the anchor points. So I can warp it in, I can warp it out. I can sort of warp it however I want to. So I've warped my apple a little bit. The twirl tool is really a pretty awesome tool. It's based on how long you hold down on it, the more twirls you get. So if I go really short, I just get a couple twirls. I go for a really long time, I get an amazing amount of twirls. Something also really cool is if you go to a couple objects and they're right next to each other, And let's move these right on next to each other. And I select them both. If I go to the twirl tool, guess what? Twirls those two items together. That is pretty cool. So you can sort of have two separate objects be twirled together. And if they're different colors, that could become a really cool sort of design. The other one I'll show you is the pucker tool, which allows you to select parts of your object inwards. So here is your pucker tool. And again, I need to select my object and see using those anchor points. So I can hold down on it and I can pull and I can pucker my object inwards. You'll notice it's affecting all of this because it's all grouped together and it's all selected. So that's the pucker tool. The bloat tool is kind of the opposite of the pucker tool. It fattens up a part of your object. Here's the bloat tool. Let me sort of bloat up this part. Bloat up over here. Whoa, bloat it up. There's also the scallop and crystallize and wrinkle tools, and I want you to play around with those and see what each one of those actually does. So these are great tools for manipulating your objects and making more interesting designs, and I used it a little bit when I was creating this apple. It's great for logo designs. You can actually refine these tools and change them. Right now they're set to the default, and to do that you just go to the actual tool and you double click, and now you have the different options of changing all the different things about this tool, width, height, angle, intensity, etc., etc. So you can actually go in and customize each individual tool. So again, play with these tools, play with sort of going in and adjusting the options. Right now they're just set for the standard, and you can change it however you wish. All right, so next thing we're going to talk about is reflecting and skewing objects. So reflecting is when you mirror the object, and skewing is when you transform the object in a slant-like appearance. So I'm just going to delete this off my screen, and I'm going to again duplicate this other one. One way that you can do that is if you hold down the Option key, you can actually just sort of reflect it that way. But again, when you do it that way, you notice I don't have control of sort of the proportionality. So that might not be a way you want to do it, but it's a quick and dirty way of doing it. Another way of doing that is if you go to the scale tool right here, that you can use the scale tool for resizing your option. You can also use it for the shear tool that you have right here, and that allows you to take your object and make it more slant-like, so you're sort of really slanting your object. So that's another way you can do that. And right here you have the rotate and reflect tool. So you can also do things in multiple ways. You can do it through the window, you can do it right through the screen. So here I have the reflect tool, and it basically just lets me reflect it that way. So those are a couple other different options. So here you have reflect, rotate tool. You also have the keyboard shortcut of 0, O, and R. And here you have scale, shear, reshape. So there's lots of different options that you can be playing around with. And again, you can pop them out, double click, and sort of deal with the finer points and customize the tools that you're working with. Again, this is all about playing around with your process, and there's more than one way of doing anything. There's always multiple ways of getting to sort of tools, getting to panels, getting to options. There's always multiple ways. You kind of have to just play around with, where are things located in the window, where, like, what panel is it in, what tool it is in, like what works best for you. Well, whatever you get sort of worked into, whatever flow works best for you. Like, maybe pressing the keyboard space bar for me is really great, but maybe you really just like going over here and holding down the hand tool. So it's really a very much of a personal preference. All right, so we're going to go to window right here, the window right here, and say go to the Align toolbox, which will also in your version show up here. You'll be able to get to Align up here. And so here is the transform. So if you select the object, this gives you the X and Y values, the width and the height. You can do the sort of shear or slanting an object from this point as well as rotating it. So as I said before, there are many different ways to do the same thing, whether you do it right here or you do it through, your tool over here. It's really up to you. So align. So we can, let me just create a couple more objects. And I'm going to move them around. So I have all these different objects, and I want them to sort of be aligned to something. So right now, this aligns them to the selection, because this is on the default, right? So if I was aligning here, we have horizontal line to the right, we have our line center, left, vertical top, horizontal left. But if I'm aligning it right now, the default is to align to your selection, and so that means within the bounding box right here. All right, but if I go right up here and I show options, not only does it give me vertical distribute space, but also horizontal distribute space, but it also allows me to decide what I'm aligning it to. So like I said, default aligns it to selection. That means anything, this box is the selection. So I would be aligning it to the top of the box or the middle of this box or yada, 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 yada. But maybe you wanted to align it to the artboard, which is this whole entire space right here. And that way, say I want everything vertical line center, that lines everything center, but I want to distribute everything, horizontal distribute center. So this is a great way to, space things out and space it out exactly without sort of eyeballing it. So it allows you to space things out in a much easier fashion. So that's what we're going to be going over today. We've done it. And now you're ready to start working. Hey, wait, don't go yet. I want to show you one more thing. So I'm going to show you how to make multiple transformations at a time as well as duplications. So I select my artwork, the object that I want to be duplicating or transforming, what have you. Go to Effect, go to Distort and Transform, and go to Transform. And you'll have this box right here, the Transform Effect. This is where you can, change horizontal and change vertical. You got to hit Preview in order to see what you're doing. So this can change your object, or you can make copies of your object. So say I want to make a whole bunch of little objects and make sure you want to keep this sort of proportional or not proportional, up to you. Then you say, hey, wait, I don't see anything. You actually have to see what happens when it moves your object. So if I move it, what happens? Oh, wow. Look at that. I can also change the angle. Whoa. Super cool. So look at that. That is pretty awesome. So that's a really cool way of if you're going to be making patterns or using your object in sort of an interesting manner. So look at this. Looks very sort of abstract, apple-y. Something very important to note is that these are all still linked. So if I edit this one and I go like this, it edits all of them. They are linked together. So the nice thing about that is that, if you want to make a change to one, it makes a change to all. But you can actually break these links, and you just select the object, and then you go to Object in the menu bar, and you go to Expand Appearance. And now these are all individual items. Just have to ungroup them, and now they're individual items. But that means if you make a change to this one, it no longer makes a change to all of them. So you have to be very decisive when you want to sort of break the link between the objects, because if you want to continue editing this and change it so that they're all the same, then I wouldn't go to Object, Expand Appearance. But if you want to make them all different, like changing the colors, yada, 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 then you can go and break the link between the objects. So that's just one final thing I wanted to show you. I thought that was really cool. So now, for real, you can get to work.